A rare outbreak of Arctic chill is set to enter the US by December. This video will break down the patterns set to lead up to that shift, plus I'll discuss how that shift could result in a pattern favorable for major winter storms. On your screen now are pieces of a graphic made by the Climate Prediction Center just a couple days ago, discussing the significant pattern change increasingly likely across much of the country. I'm going to quote the text on the left side of your screen directly so that you get a general idea of the major changes likely as November concludes. Following a warm start to November in the west and a cold start in the east, the combined effects from the current La Nina, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and the potential for a rare November sudden stratospheric warming event may usher in a significant pattern change later in the month and into early December. In the week leading up to and including Thanksgiving, a colder pattern is likely for the west while milder air overspreads the east. Later in November into early December, a transition to a colder pattern is forecast across much of the central and northern U.S. This pattern change favors a transition to more winter-like conditions across the west central and central U.S., including much below normal temperatures and the potential for heavy snow. The reason I started this video with that direct reading from the official source is because it highlights the fact that multiple factors in the atmosphere and across the world are supposed to come together to result in a cold pattern in the USA as November concludes. Of course, they've been analyzing models at the Climate Prediction Center, and one of those models is almost certainly this European model guidance, which has been pretty persistent in showing a big blast of cold air moving into the US. A lot of models have been showing this based on a lot of the factors that were just discussed in that blurb. That is why we need to be on the lookout for these significant changes that could be on the way. Exactly when do models show this cold blast taking hold now, and what could it mean for the potential of big snowstorms? Those are a couple questions I'll answer in a little bit more detail later in the video. For now, though, let's take a deeper dive into the weather for the near term. Let's take a look at the jet stream flow expected as we go across North America for the next several days. One thing worth noting, especially by the time we go towards the end of this week, is the fact that a lot of the jet stream energy riding across various parts of the country will not actually be very connected to each other. For example, we're going to have a trough or a slight dip in the jet stream riding out of parts of the south central U.S. and over towards the east as we finish this week. That could be associated with a storm system there, and there will also probably be a storm system riding in out of Canada and into the northern U.S. with this separate energy on the main polar jet stream flow. Ultimately, this somewhat disconnected pattern won't bring in any sort of major storm systems to any zones, but one big trend that will come out of this, especially with the main jet stream flow actually being right here, that's going to be a general flow of warmer than average temperatures, making it all the way up to the Canadian border. Before I dive too deep into temperatures, though, let's take a look at some of the active weather zones that will get going as we go through the next several days with those various pieces of jet stream energy. The first piece of jet stream energy worth noting is actually already pushing east as I'm recording this video on Monday. It's generally cut off from the main jet stream flow, but as it pushes to the east, it will connect with some cooler air in parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, and over towards Ohio and Pennsylvania. That's where Tuesday could actually have a little bit of some light to moderate snow as this system pushes in. South of there, it will just be a cooler rain in spots where there are some showers at times. That will be pushing through parts of the Ohio Valley and back into the Mississippi Valley. Out of Tuesday into Wednesday, a lot of the energy with that system will begin to dry up as it pushes off the mid-Atlantic shores and then into the Atlantic Ocean. This is where eyes will have to turn back to the west, whether you're in the northern U.S. or in the southern corridor. Of course, we're going to have multiple of those pieces of jet stream energy starting to enter the country as we go towards the end of this week. The biggest one that's going to bring the biggest impacts to multiple zones, that's going to be that cutoff energy coming in out of the southwestern and into the south central U.S. For a day like Thursday, November 20th, that means rainfall and high elevation snowfall pushing out of parts of the Four Corners region. And then east of there, it's really going to be a flow of south to north moisture coming up through Texas and Oklahoma. And then over into Arkansas and Missouri, that results in quite a bit of some rainfall. There will also be the potential for some thunderstorms as a warm front lifts north with this system. I wouldn't rule out the potential for some severe weather as we get some thunderstorms at times with this out of Thursday night into the early part of Friday. Eventually, you can actually see a decent bit of this moisture feeding up in a manner that almost looks like it's going towards another system. That's because it is. Up here into the southeastern part of Canada is actually going to be the system associated with that main jet stream flow. So it's going to have its own front extending down somewhat like this, and it's going to pick up that moisture coming in with the cutoff system. That's going to result in a mess of some rainfall on Friday, stretching out of parts of the central U.S., coming over into the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes, as well as the Mid-Atlantic. In fact, Friday and Friday night could be a messy time heading over into a lot of the eastern half of the U.S. By the time Saturday is over, though, a lot of that energy should be pushing off the east coast, and things will be drier for the time being, leading up to the larger scale changes that could finish November. The graphic now on your screen will highlight zones of projected 48-hour precipitation. As we go from the time I'm recording this on Monday through the end of Wednesday, that's when there will be a decent bit of rain with some of that energy already moving through the southwestern U.S. There will be some rain with that initial early week system over in the east. Overall, a lot of this won't add up past an inch or two, though, and that shouldn't result in any sort of flooding. When I think the best chance for flooding will get going this week, that's going to be as we go towards around Thursday night, and into Friday, where we'll get those downpours in the south central corridor in particular, out of Texas and Oklahoma over to Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee. That's where the best chance of inch to 3 inch rainfall totals will be possible, with some locally higher amounts. Expect at least some isolated flooding there. Elsewhere, it will just be a quarter to a half an inch of rain in many cases. Now, let's take a closer look at how temperatures are expected to shape up during the near-term time frame. With temperature anomalies in zones specifically for the middle of this week, around November 19th, for example, notice how much of the country will be warmer than average, in fact, quite a bit above normal. Especially through the central U.S. and down into the south central zones. That's where we're going to have temperatures around 10 to 15 to even 20 degrees above average through the mid to back half of this week. Even as we go towards the upcoming weekend, many zones will be above normal in the temperature department. From the northwest U.S. down to the southeast coast, numbers should be around 5 to 10 degrees above average. With those anomalies in mind, let's take a look at what they will equate to in terms of actual temperatures day by day. It's worth noting that the most persistent warmth as we go through the next several days is going to be over parts of the south central U.S., where above average means that you will be in the 70s and 80s from Texas and Oklahoma over into parts of Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, and points in between. As we go out of Tuesday into Wednesday, that warmth will only expand over the southeastern quadrant of the country. Look at these highs expected as we go into Wednesday, November 19th. Note these boxes in Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama in particular. Those indicate highs that will be well into the 80s, and those numbers should be enough to break record warm highs. Even though the numbers won't be record-breaking all the way up to South Dakota and Nebraska, there will be some 50s and 60s in the mix there, where it should easily be down in the 40s for the peak high temperatures of the day by the time we're this deep into November. In other zones in the north, Thursday will be above average in comparison to the normal. All the way as far north as Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, for example, it will be in the 50s. Beyond this week and the upcoming weekend is when the changes I discussed at the start of the video could begin to take hold. The models have been picking up on it, and this blended guidance I'm about to show certainly is, with its jet stream picture. Notice what's going on with the jet stream as we go towards the end of this weekend. We've got the main flow still all the way up here, with the U.S.-Canada border being the spot where that polar jet stream really will be moving. By the time we go past Sunday and Monday, though, and then into next week, we begin to see a big dip entering parts of the west. And pretty decent confidence with these blues and greens already showing up, indicating that trough kind of coming in like this. There is some uncertainty as to exactly how that jet stream dip will form and what it will mean for storm systems. There is uncertainty as to exactly how much cold air will really be dipping in with this at this point in time, but one thing's for certain. You can see with this long-range guidance, it looks like the jet stream is going to be active and generally a lot further south. That's going to allow some cooler air to really become a much more dynamic part of the pattern, if it does indeed occur. Trust me, though, the reason the confidence is increasing in this setup is because of all of those teleconnections the Climate Prediction Center was referencing through multiple parts of the world with those oscillations. And then, of course, the effect that could have on this jet stream, for example. Look at this. This is a different piece of blended guidance showing a pretty similar setup. Generally, the jet stream looks like it is going to be active coming out of the western and then going all the way over towards the eastern U.S. as we conclude in November and head towards December. If we do indeed have the strongest energy and troughing kind of riding up like this, that would encourage some snowstorms, especially moving through some parts of the central U.S., and of course the snow corridor would probably be a little bit further north, so maybe through the Midwest, heading up into the Great Lakes, for example. That's a possible track. I'll likely discuss the factors playing into this setup across the globe and as you go well up into the atmosphere in my next video. For now, though, let's just take a look at one last graphic before we close out. This is your 7-day snowfall mean projections from this long-range guidance. From the increment of November 19th through November 26th, notice how pretty much only the far western U.S. is looking at the highest confidence and some decent snow totals. Keep in mind, a lot of the zones in the blue could end up picking up more. This is just some long-range guidance in the mean. So with members spread out on exactly who could get the most, of course you're not going to have exact high certainty in the heavy totals, even in the higher elevations there. Once you get east of those far western zones, look at what happens as we go out of the end of November into early December. With that colder pattern expected to set in, we see a lot more snowfall confidence across a good chunk of the northern tier, especially out of the central and northern plains through the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley and then over into the northeast. This is a promising sign for snow lovers to get some of the first big hits of the season if this pattern does indeed evolve the way it is looking right now. With that being said, that brings me to the end of this video where I'd love to recap the headlines I just discussed. Of course, a wild finish to November could be on the way for much of the U.S. After a warmer pattern the next several days, a big shift to a very cold into the month is favored by most modeling. Details remain fuzzy, but the combination of factors mentioned by the Climate Prediction Center and the resulting shift should set up a series of possible winter storm chances as well. How that will evolve remains unknown, and that's why you should stay tuned right here on the channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications down below so you don't miss a beat as I post more updates in the future. My next update will likely be around the Thursday time frame. That's all I got for you, though. Make sure you check out the free trial link to Weatherbell if you want maps like the ones I have. Gotta provide that reminder for you always. Alright, thanks for tuning in. God bless you.
One Nation Web.